Hello. We did it! It'll thank it, not me. Hi everyone, I'm Fainty Balogun. I am an actor, theatre maker, and all-around artist.
I'm Danisha. I'm an actor, writer, jazz singer, and co-founder of this campaign, which Fainty also is.
Also co-founder.
I'm Kezia. I'm not an actor, but I'm a social justice campaigner and Green Rider's newest team member.
Woo!
Right? I'm Will Attenborough. I'm an actor, co-founded this with these guys, and sort of, I guess, all-round climate finance kind of campaigner man. But I guess most importantly for tonight, I'm gonna be moderating our conversation, where we'll be talking about making our industry cleaner and greener. Hopefully it will energize and empower all of you, but we sort of wanted to start off just with like a little bit of background, a little bit of spiel about who we are and where this all came from.
Yes, so we launched this campaign back in 2023 with a group of actor-vists from Equity for a Green New Deal. Shout out if we've got any of our crew in the house. Woo!
Yeah.
Yes. If you're an actor looking to kind of make change around the climate space, find these people, find us. There's so much going on in that group, and it's small but mighty. That's good. That's what I was.
Yeah, I also liked the one laugh for activist. We really didn't know a huge amount about like how the sausage gets made and how to all the technical bits basically of how to green TV and film. We were just this network of sort of angry, frustrated, sort of powerless feeling people. And we knew we wanted to do something big and bold and ambitious that felt positive in changing how our industry works.
And we have. Now Green Riders are being used all over the UK and beyond by artists at every level looking to collaborate with producers to reduce pollution overall.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
I wrote us a script, but we didn't practice.
We always say actors just want to know what their lines are. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. Yeah, well, actually, maybe just like by round of cheering, who here works in TV and film? Yeah. I was going to be like, yeah, aren't we cool? But that sounded naff. The reason I asked that is because I imagine we've all seen firsthand how wasteful our industry can be, right? And how sort of ridiculously consumptive it is. A fact that really stuck in my mind when we started preparing this project is that the average blockbuster, so something like Wicked, just the production of it creates as much carbon pollution as the city of Brighton does in 2 months. It's huge. It's so much that we're up against. At the same time, hundreds of millions of people saw Wicked. We are such a visible industry, so we have huge opportunity as storytellers.
Yeah, people watch TV and film all over the world, and it helps create culture. And there are movements attached to that culture. Think of how we reacted to COVID-19 as an industry, or the Me Too movement. Now imagine if we did the same for climate. We could have a blueprint for all types of highly emitting industries.
And we have learned so much through this campaign. So a big thing we've learned is that collaboration works better than contracts at getting real change to happen on the ground.
We've learned that bringing together actors, producers, heads of departments and agents to find solutions can transform the way a set is run.
We've learned that, yes, if you're a big star, you showing interest in this has huge ripple effects. At the same time, if you feel like you don't have power, collectivizing, coming together, whether it's through a trade union or with a group of people like you, can make huge change as well.
We've also learned to take lessons from outside of our industry through employing people like Kezia, who's got so much experience.
Can I shout? So Kezia has masses of experience in, sorry, I'm just going to embarrass you. This is like impromptu. But massive experience working for the Living Wage Foundation, getting pay rises for people who work in health and social care. And that was a really crucial thing for us, is that we want this campaign to tap into all the other issues that we struggle with in our working lives. And thank goodness that she's joined our ranks, because she's whipping us into shape and keeping us focused on that mission. Sorry.
Thanks. And we've learned that we have to keep learning. The script sort of like... our movement has got to be active and responsive to our changing political climate.
Responding to our ever-evolving industry and to the needs of our peers, we have learned that it is much better to have 99% of people trying to get it right and not even doing it perfectly than it is to have one person doing it perfectly.
We're gonna kick things off now and keep learning with you all. I guess just to underscore, we're really gassed that everyone's here tonight. We're all like actors, and you know, this is not necessary. We never expected this to be our job, kind of thing, is what I'm saying. So it's really cool for us to see a bunch of people turn up and come on board with this. As you can see, we're all a bit like, woo, like giggly and like and jazzed up that everyone's here, but it's super exciting for us. We're gonna have a panel in a moment, but before that, we're gonna watch a little movie. Is that? Oh yes. So without further ado.
Who here has ever felt powerless at a point in time?
I woke up this morning feeling quite stuck. As if suddenly there was no air to breathe, no space to roam.
Some people can go outside. Plants were either dried up or on fire. Countries were either underwater or on fire. This extreme weather is only set to increase.
This is the narrative.
Well, let's rewrite the narrative.
It's an initiative that brings together actors and producers in finding solutions to the sustainability issues that we face within our industry.
With the Green Rider, actors are asking the studio to work with them to get rid of pollution on set and tackle climate change. For example, I might say, I would rather take a train than a plane, and I don't need this massive trailer to myself. And in exchange, will the studio use cleaner, greener energy? On Gangs, we reduced our carbon pollution by 80%.
Yeah.
It's really small, simple, actionable changes.
Let's talk about our influence as actors being about what we model and present to the world rather than all the perks that we can get.
We can encourage new norms here that are cleaner, greener and fairer for all of us. And we're hoping to shift the narrative as well from fear and doom to possibility and agency. That climate action isn't just about giving things up, it's also about taking things up that can be inclusive, accessible, innovative and exciting.
If you look at other social movements in history, gay rights or racial equality, it was not the law that changed first, it was culture.
It's not about being perfect. It's about living in contradiction and changing as much as we can. You have the power to reimagine what you think is possible.
Movie magic, I love it. Great stuff, amazing.
I think it's really admirable you're using a drag bunch to highlight the plight of the melting ice caps in Antarctica.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm also a huge fan of climate change, Jack.
Right, we're going to do the panel now. Panelists. We joked about introducing them one at a time, like a game show. Lucian. But no, we'll get you all set up all together. So I'm gonna say really nice things about them all now. Joining us today is, and I hope you know I'm not just saying this, Lucian, because I did say this to you when we first met. Lucian Samati is our first guest, is one of my favourite actors. Round of applause for Lucian. Good response, yeah. I first saw Lucian on stage in a show called Ruined about 15 years ago with Jenny Jules, and it's stayed with me to this day. You might know Lucian from a whole slate of leading roles, Amadeus, Master Harold and the Boys, Ma Rainey's, All at the National, Waiting for Godot with Ben Whishaw, and on screen, Game of Thrones. I'm doing this without my notes. Game of Thrones.
All right, carry on.
Yeah. Number one ladies detective agency. Oh, yeah. Right. And a SAG award-winning performance in Conclave, which if you haven't seen, it's probably the most relevant movie out there right now.
Yes, it was all planned.
Mark, I'm going to do you next. Mark Dunn is... yeah, round of applause for Mark Dunn. Mark Dunn is a director, sure, writer, long-term collaborator with Massive Attack. In 2019, Mark and Robert Del Naja, who's the singer of Massive Attack, got together and created this thing called Act 1.5, which is an initiative to eliminate pollution from live music, basically. And they put together this incredible festival. I know a few people were there, in Bristol last year. 32,000 people showed up. It has broken all records for the cleanest, greenest live music event of all time. I believe it's like 80 to 90% reduction in carbon compared to 92. 92! And this year, Mark, who has the energy of a Duracell bunny, has also been spearheading something called the UN Accelerator City Project. This is something that started in Liverpool, and it's where a city is empowered to experiment and develop clean, green solutions to making TV, film, and music. I did that right, didn't I? Thanks, mate. Kieran Dudwell is our next panelist. Round of applause for Kieran. Kieran is a story consultant who works with an organization that we're going to hear more about later on called Climate Spring. Kieran oversees their scripted slate. Is that right? Yes, thank you. You are also, we practiced this before, you are also a story producer with over a decade of experience in TV drama, working on shows for Sky, Disney, Channel 4, the BBC. Kieran is passionate about championing writers from underrepresented backgrounds and telling stories that can motivate social and environmental change. Yeah, why not? Mandy, round of applause for Mandy Cayford, please. So Mandy Cayford is the lead consultant at an organization called Picture Zero, which is one of the biggest sustainability consultancies for the creative industries in the country. After a long career producing broadcast TV, Mandy now advises TV and film productions on upgrading their way of doing things. She's worked for NBC Universal, Channel 4, BBC, Sky, and guides these shows how to produce their content in a cleaner way, but also to look at the kind of stories that they're putting on screen and what kind of narratives we're putting out there as well. Bit of background about Picture Zero. So Picture Zero oversaw the pilot scheme, which was something that we tested out the Green Rider on a bunch of productions last year. We had 4 TV series and 3 short films, a bunch of which you saw in that sizzle reel. Making all of that happen behind the scenes was Mandy and Picture Zero, making sure that we were ambitious and that we learned as much as we could about what this whole Green Rider thing can accomplish. So that's Mandy. And the last person to introduce is Charlotte Ashby. Round of applause for Charlotte Ashby. So, I actually don't have a bio for Charlotte. I'm going to... That's it. Charlotte, so Derek Ritchie, who's the producer on a show called The Capture, was going to join us tonight because The Capture, the lead actor on that show, is using the Green Rider agreement, and we wanted to hear about how it was all going. Unfortunately, he's had to go and do some production stuff, and we were like, oh no. We are so spoiled that Mandy was coming tonight, was like, yep, I'll do it. Oh, sorry, Mandy and Charlotte both stepped up and were like, yep, we'll do it. Both Mandy and Charlotte have been intimately involved in the Green Rider from the beginning. They are total pioneers in this space. Charlotte works as the head of production for Carnival Films, which makes things like Lockerbie with Colin Firth, Day of the Jackal with Eddie Redmayne, Downton Abbey, Jamestown, and I don't know, man. I sort of want to gush endlessly about you, Mandy, because Mandy is such a pioneer of. Oh my God! It's the stress of performing. Charlotte, you're both great. Charlotte is such a pioneer of stuff behind the scenes, and was instrumental, if I may say, in setting up NBC Universal's Green is Universal program. As a pair, I'm just so grateful that you guys turned up today.
We can edit it after.
Yeah. Genuinely though, I think just to underscore what we were saying at the beginning, sometimes we're a bit like, oh, we don't really know what we're doing in this space, and you guys have all guided us so beautifully. So thank you. Okay. Okay. It's my shit notes, that's the problem. Okay, we're gonna dig in. Is it better if I sit? Is it? Okay. Oh, thank you.
Big hand for Will.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to start with you. So we started that sizzle reel with this feeling of powerlessness, but we wanted to do that because we've all felt that way coming into this work. And I think one of the key reasons that there is such a feeling of powerlessness is that we are bombarded with all this news and imagery about the urgency of this issue, but we don't necessarily see the big picture solutions. Can you tell us about what you did with Massive Attack and how you responded to that by creating big solutions?
Yeah, I can try. I think I'm going to try and sort of gauge relevance because obviously the vast majority of the work we've done has been in live music, not in film and TV, although it's now sort of crossed over into that area as well. But really, I think similar to as you just described, the genesis for our project just came from profound frustration and impatience, really, and being. I'm not going to dilute this. It was really in terms of Massive Attack and the collective that we work in. It really was a question of, well, shall we just stop what we're doing completely? And I mean, kind of bigger philosophical conversations around, is there inherent value in this event or this activity within the context of a climate crisis? So they were fun days. They weren't as fun as tonight, as you'll gather. But actually, there's something interesting I think happens in this process. I mean, I think that when this project first started, because we designed it sort of differently, although I say in many regards, when I first met Danusia and Will at Hinty and others, natural kind of siblings in terms of how we were organising and what the ethos was. I think for us, I think from an outsider's point of view, if you don't mind me saying, I think that the film and TV industry as it is today is infinitely better set up and equipped to move faster than we ever were. We certainly felt that we were dealing with layer upon layer upon layer of intransigence, and it's really only as a consequence of the event that you described, Will, last summer, which was late by 3 years because of COVID and other bits and bobs. That was really a moment of a kind of a proof of concept, but also the fact that again, to sort of think about an obvious distinction with live music and sort of scope, to use technical language, sort of scope 3 emissions, value chain emissions in film and TV, so much of that, apart from the sort of the central activity, is dispersed. It's mass dispersed. It's, servers and whatever. Can you
explain what scope 3 is?
Yeah, so it's basically value chain emissions. So in live music, that would be there are estimations of between sort of 60 and up to 80% of emissions coming from how the audience travels, because obviously it's a concentrated physical activity, whereas in something like film and TV, it's going to be dispersed, and we might talk later on about, service centres and the rest of it, as well as your kind of core activity. So I think I feel quite envious and quite jealous of the Green Ride, not only because they're all just such infectious people, but actually I sort of feel that you might make a lot more progress far quicker than we did.
And just to give a little bit of detail, what were the key things that made that reduction, that made it this like record-breaking gig?
Primarily, sort of to talk about scope 3 again, sort of travel, making sure that all the artists agreed to travel in a particular way, which they all did readily, including Killer Mike, who had come from the US. And then the audience travel, which we were sort of told within this sector, you can't do it, you can't touch it. People want to, what's that phrase? You have to meet people where they are. And so we thought we'd just kind of take that on. And so we chartered trains outside of service hours. I mean, I have to say, everyone involved, even the kind of some of the identities that don't get a lot of great press, for example, train companies or whatever, everyone was absolutely gorgeous to work with. They were all kind of, the minute the conversations start and you broke out of kind of, corporate policy or whatever you want to call it, everyone was just a delight to work with. But that would be, I'd say, the biggest one. And then the second one would be power. So to have an event complete of that size, 35,000, completely powered by renewable energy, batteries and whatever, that we were told repeatedly by the biggest promoters in the world. There's a kind of, in music, I don't know if you know, but there's kind of a corporate duopoly of Live Nation AG. We were told that you absolutely cannot do it, it won't work. It did. And then going into food, plant-based offerings or whatever. And also I think that a really important point in terms of public engagement was the way that we described it, the nature of the invitation that we made, which was, this is an experiment. Yeah. We might not get it right. We want you to try it. And yeah, without being too arrogant. I mean, I think it was whatever our expectations were. It worked much better.
Yeah. So some of us went, and it was just like, it was a massive festival. I think you could go and not have known that any of that stuff was happening behind the scenes, but all of the food trucks were vegan. The queues were insane. I believe that was part of the reason, right? That people were like, oh, people won't eat the vegan food, but it was like massive queues. Ecotricity provided all the battery storage, right? And it was like...
Ecotricity and Zenobi, I think.
Oh, Zenobi, okay, yeah. And there were extra trains put on. There were shuttle buses taking people to and from the train station. So it was just so well thought through, and I wanted to kind of like pin that to the mast a little bit to give us some ambition, because it really underscored what we can achieve. To kind of zoom out for a moment and like make it personal, if I may come to you, Lucien. You're obviously here because you're a lovely person, and you were in you were in Gangs of London. But I'm curious, what was your, what is it about this issue that motivates you? I know when we first spoke, you mentioned your kids teasing you and telling you off about recycling and stuff like that. Yes. But I'm curious, is that a motivator?
A little bit. When you spend years with two very opinionated, overly confident teenagers who have a better answer than you for anything and everything, and who are constantly going on, it's not that bin, it's this bin. I'm like, you'll sleep on the streets, don't mess with me. But actually, obviously this is an issue within our lifetime. It's an issue that is affecting everything. It sort of tentacles out into every aspect of our life. But I have to say, and I spare no blushes, that it is you guys. You, as our colleague here said, it's you meeting the issue where you are. And you met me where I was and where you were. I remember Fainty, when was it? Was it 2 summers ago, bumping into each other in Clapham? Yes, when I was running away from some football thing that my daughter was doing. And we had this wonderful conversation. You told me all about your mother in Nigeria. And I remember you saying, how is that not climate activism? And then you said to me, we've got this idea, maybe can I hit you up at some point? And fast forward a few years later, next thing, I'm meeting all of you lovely people, and there you were, speaking with passion, speaking with honesty, and yes, blowing suitably fragrant carbon neutral smoke up my, you know what? And it was nice. I'm cheap. But actually, and this is the key thing, and I know there's plenty of fellow storytellers and artists here, I think sometimes the pressure we feel and the fear is that, well, I'm not an activist, I don't know. I don't think that is sometimes our biggest strength. I think the biggest strength sometimes is in our advocacy to help those who are on the front line. And so I am here for you, pure and simple. That's it.
Can I ask, what was this, if you're happy to share it, what was the story about your mum and you felt like that was climate activism?
So it was probably And I think you find a lot with people that come to this country from other countries that they're incredibly resourceful. So everything everything is reused, everything is given to another person. All my school uniforms were someone else's before. And my mum would send money back home to deal with things that were happening home. Now, where Nigeria is a better example where my friend's parents are from in the Caribbean, they're affected by climate extremes way more often, but their culture is to send money home. So if you've got someone here working and making, thank you. If you've got someone in this country working and making money to send money home to their home country to look after their family who is being affected by climate extremes, how is that not climate activism? And it's just a different way of thinking culturally about how we're all trying to look after each other and respond to what's going on whilst living in an extreme time. Yeah.
That is such a great segue for my next question, so thank you for that. Because what you're describing is so opposite, right, to the ways in which our industry works and particularly treats famous actors, but also what we are therefore kind of taught is aspirational and like a good way to live, right? Is like this kind of highly consumptive lifestyle. And I want to stay with you, Lucy, and like when we first started doing this, we talked to a bunch of people, you know, like Mandy and Charlotte, and we were kind of going like, what are the blockages here? And to be frank, a lot of the feedback we got from various quarters was the blockages are actors and agents, because they're going to keep asking for these really consuming perks, and it makes everything else more difficult. And we thought, I'm sure there's loads of actors who don't want that and who do care. But the barrier there was that people felt that they couldn't go and bother the actor, like the hallowed actor, with these issues. And I wonder, why do you think that is? Why do you think there is this way in which like actors are treated, but also that our value is determined by the perks that we get?
Well, that's a really interesting and kind of multi-pronged question. I think, first of all, in some instances, there's a hell of a lot of money involved. And he who pays the piper calls the tune, right? I think the second thing is that we are, and all of my fellow artists here, it's a cutthroat industry. How many of us spend the bulk of our lives looking over our shoulder, going, when's the next gig? Can I afford the next thing? So how many of us can sit here and go, I can afford my principles? I know, sitting on as a trustee of various theatre companies, having tried to run theatre companies, very few of us, in fact I know of 2 high-profile actors who live by their principles, but have the clout and have the capacity to go, I will walk away and not do it. How many of us can afford to do that? Truly and honestly, how many of us can afford to do that? But then, this now spills into the question of advocacy, of collectivization. What if all of us got up and said we won't do it? What then happens? You know? Then you've got things like, you know, I mean, it's a very stupid joke I was looking at the other day. You know, there are things like, how do you tell someone who comes from, I speak as a very proud African man, where you're dealing with people who are told, how can you make me eat food that my food eats? You know? How can you tell me that I must eat these leaves or I must eat these, you know, you are, it takes time to change culture. Yeah. It takes time to change habits. But what is most important is, coming back again, meet me where you are. Make that person understand. We had a very, without naming names, and I don't name names for the sake of scandal, but just because sometimes if you name names, that becomes the story and the message becomes lost. Very recently, a show that we were trying to curate had an incredibly well-known star of stage, or screen, rather. And part of the challenge in selling that show was in trying to make this perfectly amazing artist understand that, look, in the world of theatre, We do not have the resources to go on a huge marketing campaign. We need you to come and sit with our funders. We need you to wake up. I know that you don't do that in, the big H, but actually, we need you here. And this is our learning, to go, what we need to do is to explain to this person, this is why we need you. This is because they're not going to come and listen to me. They're going to come and listen to you. And I think it's where we place the conversation and where we say to each other, I will help you. I will be there for you if someone says, well, you won't get paid this or you won't get paid that. And it's not easy, but we can try. Yeah. I hope that answers the question or addresses it in a way that is of use
Completely.
To you.
Yeah? Yeah, you're smashing it.
Yes, of course.
No, and it actually tees up something I wanted to ask, which is, so to give context for people, we came into this, we knew that riders they're not a new thing, right? Like they've been around for a long time. They're a request for certain things that enable the artists to do their job. But we have probably all heard of them because of horror stories of, I heard a crazy one recently about Grace Jones. Used to apparently, she would request like oysters and champagne stuff, but also a group of nice-looking men to be in her dressing room. Have you heard that one?
It's a fact.
It's
I'll never walk again.
Cheap. I totally forgot what I was going to say now. No, so we were like, oh, but these riders have been used. There is a bargaining, there is a power, that, as you're pointing out, that well-known entertainers and artists have, and so that bargaining power has been used to request, like there are diversity riders, for example, people going, we need to have a gender balance on this set, or I'm only coming if you have, X number of people from my background who look like me on set as well. And we were like, great, we can use this power, this like bargaining demand power, to push for positive stuff on climate. That's where it all started. What we learned in testing out the Green Rider on a bunch of TV shows, thanks to Mandy and Picture Zero, is that, and as Danusha said in our intro, collaboration was way more effective. So we'll talk about this again later because I want all the actors and producers in this room to go away using this tool, but we put together this thing called the handshake agreement, and it's not a contract. It's something that we want artists to send, and producers, frankly, to send to the other party when the job starts, going, this is where I am, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I commit to, where can you meet me and what can we do together? Long, winded way of segueing into a question, Charlotte, because you've had tons of experience around this, and I wanted to ask, what was the difference between what felt like the difference between someone coming in making a bunch of demands and someone coming in, particularly an actor, going, I want to work with you on this and collaborate?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Well, I think that, many of us in this room have been working to make change in we're working practices on production for some time now, and I think we were busy doing our things, and then the talent was kind of over there in terms of that conversation, and then we got together, we started that conversation again with lots of people in this room, and what's been very exciting about that is I think that having, the actors involved who really, I guess, are the face of a production in so many ways, having their involvement and their commitment, whoever it is, in whatever way, raises the profile. When you raise the profile, it draws attention. And when it draws attention, you get momentum. And I think that it's really hard to quantify. You wouldn't point at something and say, you could put a number to it. Say we reduced our emissions by X, or we reduced flights by Y, but more people got involved. there was more momentum, more enthusiasm, we had better outcomes, and, you know, I guess also quite often great bonus content to share afterwards that, you know, that then engages future productions, because you can, you know, you can share that, you know, we're a creative industry, and so, you know, people respond to creative content, and we can create creative content with creative people. That really inspires others.
And is the, I mean, I guess something, again, that we didn't know when we started this was that there's loads of people on the production side who are working incredibly hard to innovate and find clean energy solutions, cleaner supply chains for food and transport and all that kind of thing. But most actors don't know that. And I wonder, like, what kind of, what can we say to actors, I guess, to tell them production companies want this? Because a lot of actors feel like, I'm going to be a pain in the arse for making us think about this. How can we kind of send, like, the opposite message? Or is that true? I don't know if you can't only speak for Carnival, right?
I think it's absolutely true, and I think that conversation with your agent to say, I would love it if you could pass a message on to say, I'm, you know, even if it's not signing a Green Rider, but I support the Green Rider campaign, whether it's in the form of a formal document, a handshake or a rider, or whether it's just a conversation, passing that message on, it's going to land from the agent to the casting director to the producers. It's like you've got, and immediately you're dealing with, you know, the creatives on the show. So, you know, frankly, that has can have an extraordinary effect, which means then in that slipstream, you know, people like Mandy and myself can come in and, you know, go with the flow.
So it helps
instead of pushing.
Right, it helps you do your job.
Instead of pushing, yeah.
I was going to come to you, Mandy. So can we say the production and the actor that you're working on, well, the actor that you're working on, but the production you're working on and the actor involved?
That's fine.
So some context here is that Holiday Granger, who was part of our pilot scheme, she's on a show called Strike, she's the number one, she's the lead on a show called The Capture. And I'm going to get you to talk about this, but I believe all her agent did was just send the handshake to production. Can you talk about what ripple effects and what impact that then had?
It was massive, and I think what's important to understand as well is this happened in pre-prep. So this was before we'd even got into the production office. This was one of the first things that I was sent. It's in place, it's done. So for me, that almost kind of made my job super easy, because I had that buy-in all there from the very beginning. Now, it also helps that our producer is absolutely amazing and has been one of the most incredible green champions. I can't even begin to tell you. But so from that very first conversation with him, he said, we've got a Green Rider, let's look at it. What does that mean? You know, how do we implement that? And it was like, well, it's all the stuff. It's all the joyous stuff that we know we need to do. What I was conscious of, though, was not to lynch everything onto that Green Rider. I didn't want that to be the full responsibility, because then that means that you're trying to force people into doing stuff just because it's in writing. So I still have to do all of the work behind that and talk to all of the people on the production, but to actually know for everyone on the crew and everyone in the cast to know that their lead actor has actually committed to wanting to make the production as green as possible. It sets the tone. And that's why it's really important. And my window talking to the cast, which often comes too late. I mean, you know, it's generally, if we get the opportunity as a sustainability consultant to talk to the cast, it's at the read-through, because that's the, you know, because before then, most of the cast aren't even under contract, and everything's kind of a bit messy at that point. But being able to be in the physical room and address every single one of those cast and explain to them what the green, and I don't like to use the term rider, because it does have connotations of contracts and legal, and it's, you know, it could be, you know, around money, but talking to them about the three really important things that we need to do. One, which is data, which often, you know, kind of, you know, sends the room into complete silence, but it's, you know, it's an important thing of what we're doing. Actions, which is where the engagement begins with, you know, these are the things that we need to be looking at, and then the culture change, and that's the sweet spot. And that, you know, that is why having Holiday in the room while I was doing this and just nodding and smiling, and also being able to play some amazing bonus content from one of our productions, and I know he's here tonight as well, because I saw him earlier, he's in it, gave me a round of applause from the entire cast, which was completely unexpected. And from that moment, it's had a complete trickle effect, with, you know, a really high volume of cast responding to our survey, people wanting to be involved, people wanting to be informed, people getting in touch. And that's amazing. And that's the ripple effect.
Right, and that's, I think that's because so many actors don't know how things get made.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of us do feel this feeling of powerlessness where we're like, oh, I'm so depressed by the news, but then I'm going to work and I'm seeing this sort of high consumption, high waste. So I think then to get to see what's actually being done and how they can help it is really galvanizing.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, absolutely. And I, you know, it has been really interesting, and it's actually made changes to some of the other ways that we've worked. And, you know, in fact, one of our cast immediately phoned and said, I don't want a unit car, I'm going to travel by train. I had no idea, you know, what impact, you know, this was gonna have, and just genuinely showing an interest. But as you say, there is still a huge lack of awareness of what these initiatives are that we need to be trying to implement. But having the vehicle of the Green Rider and the handshake is just perfect. I mean, you know, the moment that we were all on that big call where it was all finalised and we were talking about it, it was like, oh, this is it. It's like the final piece of the puzzle for me in my role that was missing of that. I've now got something where I can actually try and make inroads to get over that hurdle of you can't talk to the cast.
Yeah, thanks. So we've been talking about kind of like production and how stuff gets made. And Kieran, I want to come to you because potentially sort of more impactful is what gets made and the stories that are told because of the reach that we have. Can you just explain what Climate Spring is, what you do?
So Climate Spring is an organisation that tries to encourage climate change through narrative. So, oh, sorry, it's not on. Okay. Hello. So Climate Spring is it's an organisation that's a non-profit that basically encourages climate change through storytelling. So we try and encourage the narrative to say something about the world we want to live in. We kind of have three sort of areas that we look at. One is justice storytelling, so getting people to getting accountability and raising awareness through climate injustice. And then we have like journeys, so working towards worlds we want to live in, and then world building, which is creating those worlds and envisioning those worlds that we want to live in. So it's getting writers and directors and creatives in general just to think a bit bigger than also just your obvious climate story, which might be a group of climate activists against a big oil. It's also thinking about the values that climate justice incorporates. So it's stories that are about community and decolonize, and also I think we've talked a lot about it before, encourage collaboration. And I think a lot of archetypal stories are following the hero's journey. So it's kind of getting us to think about ways in which we might tell stories that are more maybe even ensemble, or getting us to think outside the box a little with those stories.
And are there any that, so something that is always stuck in my mind is, there's this research, right? You'll probably know this much better than me, but there's this research about this idea of social tipping points that are to change how a society views an issue, to change its values, what you need to do is engage about 25% of the population. Is that right? And then you can kind of like the society starts to shift in its value system. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't actually know the exact stat of it, but I think, yeah, I suppose TV, as we all know, has the power to change cultural norms. So I think it's using that vessel with Climate Spring, which we're trying to kind of encourage people to think about their values in another way, and yeah.
And are there examples of how we've done this before?
Yeah, so at the moment, for example, we're working there's a show with Sister, Dreamlands, which I once upon a time worked on as well, briefly, as a story producer in the room. But that is a book based on, by Rosa Rankin-Gee, which is based on Margate being siphoned off, as that's going to be the area that will flood first, and
As in it's like flooded by
climate disaster.
Okay.
So it's kind of setting a dystopian future, and so that's about resilience and how we kind of move through that, and work through storytelling and work through the climate disasters that are going to happen, and get people to kind of think about ways that they can move through that.
So sort of imagining the extreme weather and the extreme events that might come and how we might get through them as a people. Yeah, I don't know if people saw The End We Start From as well. It comes to mind. Quite a similar film.
And obviously, there's extrapolations, and we had Don't Look Up as well. So they're quite your kind of obvious stories in that sense. But I think, and we had After the Flood as well, which is all about community coming together.
Yeah, I mean, I also sometimes think about, in my moments of doubt and despair, I think about how TV and film have just massively changed how we as a society relate to certain issues. So I know that in our intro we talked about Me Too and how a change within our industry rippled out. It was so visible and it changed society. But what I kind of hadn't appreciated was how issues like gay rights, for example, were so far advanced, not just by activists, but by Will and Grace, putting gay people like in the living rooms of conservative families, so they felt, I know a gay person. You go.
Yeah, I think it's also thinking about it like representation. We have representation so people can connect and find humanity in people of colour or through people with different sexualities and different genders. And it's also getting them to understand and connect the dots with climate and how race and inequity is all part of the same extractive system, and how we can move away from that and kind of come together more and collaborate, which is kind of what we've been talking about, and work towards that in society. And again, it's doing it in ways that are quite subtle and getting people to care about the interconnectedness between us and the earth and how it's the same system.
So there's for writers, developers, creators who might be in the room, it's like what you guys do, it's not just confined to a particular genre, right? It's like you can support and consult with all kinds of content.
And it's exactly that. It's trying to tell these stories through different genres. So, a lot of people just, in terms of commissioning, sometimes we get that it needs to be entertaining. And of course, everybody goes to TV to want to be entertained. But part of what makes something entertaining is our connection with the characters and the story. So if we're living in a more capitalistic society, in a world that's more extractive, that encourages disconnectedness. So it's how can we connect people to the values that are more about collaboration and are more about coming together through storytelling, and find ways to encourage connectedness that way.
One of the challenges around that, and I'm going to come to you, Mark, is we're so individualized as a society, right? Like we are like glued to our phones. Our attention is pulled in so many different directions. And there's this phrase that politics is downstream of culture. So I guess it's what I said in the video, that like, if you can control the culture and the narrative, then you can control the politics. And I'm just thinking about how the right, and particularly the far right, have been incredibly skillful at gathering our attention through podcasts, through YouTube channels, through Donald Trump and his personality. And they have made fascist politics feel rebellious and appealing, particularly to young men. One of the ways that we can counteract that is through, and get attention, is through like very well-known, visible people. And I wanted to ask, how do we do that in a way that doesn't come across preachy or out of touch? And I, if you allow me to say, you're working on a project with a very famous person coming up, right? I don't know if that's a sort of example of how we do this.
Potentially, yeah. I think, sorry, I don't want to answer a different question than the one you just asked. But if you'd asked me that question on maybe Monday, I think I would have answered it fundamentally different to how I'm going to answer it, because I don't know if any of you have seen or been aware of this project, which is a project that has been generated by, I think, 44 newsrooms across, predominantly in Northern Hemisphere, but around a bit as well, called the 89%. And it's based on a new piece of research which is coordinated by Yale and Oxford University. It's been peer-reviewed. It's a huge sample of like 145,000 people. And it's called the 89% the report because they've concluded that 89% of the population by sortition across the world, both hemispheres, want to see more climate action from their governments. And that includes, by the way, when you think of the Northern Hemisphere or the G20 countries, and you think about where sort of, I don't know, 78% of the emissions are coming from, those numbers are pretty much the same. They're above 80%. And to me, it's sort of funny because when you sort of look at empirical evidence, and we try and do that a bit before we go talking about things, all of the polling that I see, all the tracker polling I see from YouGov and wherever else, all the psephologists that I talk to, and then even
psephologist is
the study voting patterns and attitudes and stuff. All of that evidence, including that there was the more in common piece, I think would have been in December. All of the numbers are emphatic, and I sort of felt quite strange on Monday because I sort of felt like I'd been sort of massively gaslit by this kind of chasm of division that we're losing this argument. That's not to undermine, by the way, any of the sort of really pernicious and toxic stuff that is going on in the manosphere, particularly when you look at race politics and misogyny and all that. I don't mean to disparage any of those things at all, but given the context of tonight, we're talking about climate. I thought that was staggering information, and actually I sort of felt a bit annoyed for an hour, and then I felt just quite ecstatic, actually, to start to sort of reframe the way that I would talk about these things as I'm in the majority are with me. And I guess the really interesting thing about this piece of work is, and let's be honest, I mean, in my opinion anyway, I trained as a journalist and a reporter. I don't think the mainstream media have covered themselves in glory particularly, so it's good that this is coming from them in 45 different newsrooms, but it should give us a context and a basis and an atmosphere, I think, particularly now where, the far right, as far as I can see, have no sort of natural predators, to just go for it and just, increase your connectivity, increase... What was the question you asked me, by the way?
No, it's really good. So because it's something that's on my mind all the time, is that like, and correct me if I'm surmising what you're saying incorrectly, but the backlash in some ways is manufactured, right? We think that this issue, particularly around climate, but a whole host of progressive issues, are really polarized. And actually, all the research on climate change shows, as you're saying, vast majorities of people want to see bold action from their governments on this.
Correct, yeah. And actually, what terrified me about that report on Monday was I can remember in the sort of fag end of when I was still doing journalism, seeing really similar data around Brexit. That actually, by every tracker poll, by all the research, it was kind of coming in at like 7th or 8th or even 9th, across all demographics across the country. And then there's this sort of confection that makes it this wedge issue. And I as these things, you hear something, you notice something, and you join it up. I was listening to something on the radio yesterday when they were saying about this is net zero is the new Brexit, it's the new chasm. So the timing of the 89% stuff is I think really really powerful. You did ask me something about...
Well, so here's my thought / question. What I would love to see is all the powerful artists in the world coming to this table and going, we're going to clean up how we do things. We're going to change how we make films. We're going to change how we make music. And we're going to lean into this narrative change work where we can see new messages, new way of doing things, imagine new futures, like Kieran's saying. How do we do that in a context where the kind of prevailing feeling, the prevailing mood right now is really populist and anti-establishment? So if you don't mind me sort of stealing your thunder, is that the right phrase?
I haven't got any.
Sure. Mark is, at 1.5, is about to work on Billie Eilish's next tour, right? Incredibly famous, well-known person. Who has a megaphone and audience? How do we use that audience and that megaphone without people going, what the fuck does Billie Eilish know about how I live my life? How do we do that and not seem just like... Because a lot of celebrities came out in favor of Kamala Harris, right? And it's not said that that didn't work, but I think it potentially contributed to this notion of like, these people don't know what it's like to go to the store and be struggling to make ends meet.
But it's an interesting debate, isn't it? And you're right to use the Kamala Harris example of how does something like that, sort of misfire or backfire so much. Our own view, in terms of the collective that I work in, and we're lucky enough sometimes with other artists that will come in and say, can we borrow something of this? Can we nick a bit of this? And we always try, and service that as much as we can. I would say that my advice to artists is always, I don't mean in terms of hectoring or anything of that nature, but we have found it evidentially more useful, what we call pilot by behaviour or pilot by action. So rather than talk about what one should be doing or to actually talk about the process you're in, because for us, remarkably actually, the process itself seems to really intrigue people. I think people, generally speaking, respond really well to challenges, and especially when I talked when we first started about the language of invitation and the language of experiment, and we're going to try this and it might not work. Would you give us a hand? I don't know where you live, but where I live and where I come from, if you say that to someone, even though you don't speak to them, they'll do something. Do you know what I mean? I know it's primitive, but it actually works quite well. And we definitely, around the Bristol experiment and certainly in Liverpool so far, Liverpool's a really interesting petri dish because there are genuinely, notwithstanding what I just said about the 89%, there are some sort of hard attitudes about net zero or whatever you want to call it in Liverpool, and that to me is extremely exciting that we should take that on, and we are. And so far, it's early to say. This is not a judgment on that, but the invitation into that process, even really, really almost semantic things like flipping, talking about emissions or GHG into air pollution. And having kind of stand-up conversation with people where you begin to say, you hear it reflexively. I think it's not a hoax, or not at the bananas end, but I think it's going to be too expensive or something like that. And then you begin to talk about air pollution, and reflexively you get, and I don't like air pollution. I don't want that. But it's the same source, so we can do it your way if you prefer. You know what I mean? And you get into what I find quite a stimulating and quite fun exchange. So yeah, my general advice to artists is praxis, is try it, get involved in a process and talk about that, because I think that's more
practice.
Praxis, getting on with it, actually doing the work.
So I'm taking jargon out, right? And meeting people where they are. If people are like, I don't know what a GHG emission is, but they do think about the air they breathe every day. And you also said this thing of like experimenting. That I wonder if that's something that we wanted to kind of highlight in our intro, was it's not about being perfect, and sort of normalizing imperfection, making people feel like, yes, we can get involved, and it doesn't mean I can never fly to see my family again, or I have to be vegan, and it's much, as Fainty would say, it's much better to have 99 imperfect people than one Puritan. Lucian.
Hi.
Hi. It's made me nervous for some reason. I have two questions for you. Yeah. The first is, we want to, the project that we're working on here is we want to see a world where, where I've just had a time, I just have one of those notes. We want to see a world where being a star isn't measured by how much you consume, but by the leadership that you show, the kindness that you show. we are seeing the totally opposite story told by so many different people, from Kim Kardashian to Andrew Tate. Like, that's all about like consumption. And how do you encourage people to approach actors who, from my sense, is like, actors are more motivated by telling stories, right, than getting rich and famous. But how do we kind of approach them and meet them where they are, whilst recognizing we do have this frustration of, could you just not fly your private jet? Like how do you have tips for how to kind of meet people that you work with where they are and get them on this train?
So the first thing I would say is that at ground level, the first thing we've got to accept is you're not going to get 100% buy-in. Right. There's going to be resistance. People are going to tell you no. They're going to tell you bleep, 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 bleep. That is entirely their prerogative. You can't tell another human being what to do. Picking up on what you said, Mark, there was a brilliant podcast in which former Governor Schwarzenegger and current and eternal Terminator was talking about his success during his time as governor with the question of climate change. And it was exactly that he realized very quickly that most people don't know what climate change means, but they do understand pollution. So let's talk about pollution, right? What is the point of entry? You coming to say to me, listen, Lucian, I want to make this great film about this, about that, but here's the thing, I really believe in green principles, and I would like you not to have 14 jets for your chihuahua and for your family. How do we do that?
You've no idea what it took to get him here.
Again, it's about meet me where I am. You guys are your energy, your enthusiasm to just sit down and talk on a level as a human being to go, look, this is what I want to do. How do we do it? I am reminded of, the story of how Will Smith got his audition for The Fresh Prince. He was invited to Quincy Jones's house at a party. Quincy Jones called him into an office and said, right, so all the people who can help you make this show are here. Here's the script, do the audition. And Will was like, oh no, but I'm not ready. He was like, okay, so when will you be ready? Because if you say next week, the head of NBC, the head of so-and-so is gonna call and say, well, I can't make it. And then you go, okay, 2 weeks time. And you say, well, if you do that, then the other person, the head of CBS is gonna say, well, I can't do it. Your time is now. You've got 10 minutes. So my provocation, my invitation to us all is, here we are, right now, in the conduit, right? There are enough people here, there are enough artists, there are enough activists. Let's have the conversation, let's start doing it now. We're here, aren't we? We didn't just come here for the free canapes and the food and a potential date, did we? No, let's have the conversation. It's not this big mountain, it starts with a little conversation. This is why we're all here, not so? So let's have the conversation. Let's get hammered, let's go whatever, but let's have the conversation. This is why we're here. We're not here to be sexy, not here to talk heads, to go, oh look, I'm sitting here talking about my green credentials. Fuck that. Let's have a conversation. Because all the people who want to make the shows that you want to make, all the people that want to enforce the policies that you want to see are here. So it's now, it's today, not tomorrow, not next week. Thank you.
We don't even have canapes. But there is a thing there, and this is going to be sort of the last gabbing from me, and then we're going to pass mics around and give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. But the thing that's leaping out to me there is getting in the room, and everyone here has connections, right? Like, we do know people who know someone, and if you are feeling like, I'm not number one on the call sheet or whatever, I'm worried about my lack of power, there's this piece of, like, build power. Like, be other versions of us that can go out and proselytize and be evangelical about it and go, I've got this really cool thing that I can put on your radar. Would you get in a room with this team? I'm going to come back in a moment to sort of the takeaways, like you said. What are we going to do now? I want to sort of save that for the end, so you have all your calls to action to take away. But But I'd love to open the floor up if we're ready with roving mics. We have hands. I love it. Yeah. We have a question from Tori just down here.
Well, we'll get to Tori after.
Oh, Tori will come second.
Hi, I'm Corinne. I'm a film financier. And I was wondering, how does the Green Rider, do you guys work with Albert at all? Like, is there any kind of sharing of information or best practices?
Albert. Sorry, do we share practices with BAFTA Albert?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is there something like it feels that there should be?
Yes, sorry. So for people who don't know, BAFTA Albert is part of BAFTA. It's the leading sustainability organization for TV and film in the country. Started quite similar to how we started, just a group of people getting together and going, let's clean this up. And it's grown considerably, and they will provide huge amounts of resource to and information to TV productions about how they decarbonize. It's also a requirement, am I getting this right, for any production that is made
commission productions. Yeah.
Thank you, UK commission productions. So anything BBC, Channel 4,
Sky.
Thank you, Sky, has to be accredited by an ITV, by BAFTA Albert. So yeah, we work really closely together. I should say the Green Rider was actually their idea to begin with. They tried to launch it in very early 2020, and then this thing called COVID happened, and it all got sidelined. And then Danusha found it and was like, this is so ripe for actors to take this up. So what we're really keen to do is not be another layer of admin or bureaucracy for production companies to go through, because they're like, we're already doing this BAFTA Albert thing, we've got to do Green Rider as well. Instead, we want to be this tool to support them so that it's going to make it so much easier to achieve your goals as a production, because Lucian is going to be your cheerleader with the cast and is going to get all the cast involved as well. Does that answer the question?
Can I just add to that slightly as well? So as part of the questions that Albert asked, which it's a kind of series of questions, every question you answer positively to, you get an extra point. And as what part of that, they ask, have you got a Green Rider on your production? So you'll get a positive mark, and then they might want to see, more evidence. And the other thing I think that's interesting is that as part of that collaboration, that we publish case studies with Albert, so where we've done sort of great work, which relates to the Green Rider as well. So there's definitely collaboration and knowledge sharing as well. I think that's what you were asking.
We're all looped up, so they, BAFTA and Equity as our trade union have both come together to endorse and support this.
I think the problem with Albert is that they weren't necessarily the right mechanism to really launch this, and they're quite a small setup as well. And I think it needed actors to actually be driving it, but with their absolute support to do it.
Somebody over here.
Hello. So this is less of a question, actually, more of a response to what you asked Mark about Billie Eilish. And I work quite closely with Billie and her family on some of the climate stuff that they do. And I think something that's really clever about what they do is they pass the mic. And for those who don't know, Billie, whenever she does a tour in the UK, she has something called Overheated, which is like this full day of programming all about climate change. She invites, people in their respective sustainability fields to come and speak. She gives out a handful of tickets to lots of her fan base, and she's essentially like, I'm not the expert here, you guys do the talking. And I think the film industry could perhaps take a leaf out of that book, where if you're not feeling comfortable sort of embodying these sorts of changes that people want to see in society, at least pass the mic. And also, Billie got invited to do the front cover of Vogue back in 2023, and she said, I'm not doing it unless I can have people on board. So she invited a bunch of us to do the front cover with her, and they produced this stunning sort of visual piece. It was a video because it was digital, and one of the first things she says is, "I'm not the expert, you guys are. How do you keep going? Like, can you teach me your ways?" And I think that's something that can be really implemented. Like Ben Hurst, for instance, with the screening of Adolescence, did like a whole sort of conversation with the producers, directors, had this huge forum, and like he specializes in talking about toxic masculinity and how to undo those sorts of cultures. And I think perhaps that's an avenue that could be explored. So if anyone wants to talk about that, come hit me up.
I think the empowerment thing is absolutely spot on, and I always talk about the fact that I'm not the expert in all of the different departments and all the different fields that I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to each head of department, whether it's costume, whether it's facilities unit, etc. But what I do is I facilitate people to actually achieve the decarbonisation initiatives that we're trying to achieve, and when we're part of the process, we do a crew kickoff, and everybody, each head of department, talks about what we've been planning to what we're going to actually deliver on when we're filming, and it's a really beautiful moment to actually hear them talking about the things that they were really anxious about trying to plan in prep. So I think that empowerment is absolutely spot on.
Got a question back here.
Hi, hi everyone. Mark earlier talked about the biggest impacts on the massive attack event was transport, power, and food. I'm just wondering, you've got a lot of people in the room who are very engaged to try and push the same agenda in the film industry, but what is the lowest hanging fruit? If people can change one thing, what would be the one thing that would have the biggest impact on a normal production? Is it power? Is it food? Is it transport?
It's always travel and transport. That's the biggest impact on productions, and
I'll
then
add
power
something
after
to
that.
Yeah, I think lowest hanging fruit is probably power, because there are solutions right there that we can adopt. Suppliers getting on board with providing the kit to do it, and cost-wise, it's reasonably achievable depending on where you are. So that's power's the low-hanging fruit.
Yes, sorry, I mean
no, I know.
Yeah.
Power's the low-hanging fruit. Ground transport is the biggest nut to crack. We know what the solutions will be, but the infrastructure and the supply chain isn't quite there. The sort of outlying surprise member of that undesirable group is material use. So we've started to measure more robustly our use of materials, both for set construction, costume, set deck and props, and that has really sort of shone a light that is on many of our scripted shows and films is often, very high up in terms of emissions. So in terms of messages for actors, producers and directors, I guess it's like actually those putting throwing the pebble into the pond or making that simple request. Some of those things are actually within your power to opine on, like how am I travelling to and from work? Is it possible that it could be in an EV, and could I be car sharing? We've had actors offer to car share with anybody on the crew, and actually we put some of the names that you mentioned in cars who were travelling in with runners, and I was like, actually that's doing just more than saving emissions and pollution. That's really powerful in terms of messaging about, on this issue, we're all in it together, we're all crew, and the fact that the actor does that somehow means more than, it's symbolic as well as actually practically reducing emissions. So that's number one. You've got agency over ground transport, and symbolic acts mean a lot. People notice it, and people get on board with a project because you've done that. Like, that's really powerful.
I think that's why it's low-hanging fruit, though, because it's one of the things that actors will connect with. Sorry, I'm just agreeing with you. I mean,
Come on, Charlotte. I mean, actually, if I may, this tees me up quite nicely because I think we
And
often...
costume, sorry, I just wanted
Oh,
to
please,
say
please, please.
costume. Just one other thing about costume, like that's actually new costumes that, you know, have a big impact. I know it seems like such a small thing. People say, oh, it's only costume. No, this is big. Like, is there something you can do, a conversation you can have with your head of department about actually, you know, what can we do? Can we try to not just do the simple thing of buying 10 items, 9 of which get, you know, put in a box?
Because it's thousands of T-shirts.
Sorry, so
when
I
it
just
all
wanted to
sets up,
mention,
right?
like, costume is big,
Yeah.
ground transport were big. These are both areas that you touch.
Well, I just want to take the opportunity because we do quite a lot of talking about Green Rider, but we sometimes forget to say what's actually in it and like how it works. So what we really are encouraging anyone who's an actor or a creative in this room to do is go to our website, and the document that we are spotlighting is called the Green Rider Handshake Agreement. And we really try to focus on those key impact areas that you very helpfully outlined for us. The thing that we tend to see in front of us usually is what we eat and what we throw away, right? What we eat is impactful for sure, but sometimes we get stressed about recycling, and it's not said that's not important, but it can be useful to kind of lift our eyes up and look at some of these big key impact areas. So when it comes to energy, we ask actors do you need that massive Winnebago? Could you do a two-way or a three-way trailer? Again, that's culturally quite a useful thing for an actor to show that they're getting on board. And then in exchange, could the producer come to the table and go, do you know what, we're going to power that trailer with HVO fuel, which is this fuel that's made from vegetable oil, and it's made from like waste product, like used vegetable oil, and it burns so much more cleanly. Or could we plug into the grid? Could we use renewable sources? So there's energy, there's transport. Could you take a train over a plane? Could you take an electric vehicle? Reusing sets and costumes, as you said. Food, I would say, is in some ways quite low-hanging fruit, right? In that we could all eat less meat. The reason that that's more complicated is because it's so cultural, how people feel about food. So taking beef off the menu is greatly impactful. You just have to be quite sophisticated in how you go about it, right?
Never talk about
Never
no
talk-
beef.
never
Never
talk.
talk about no beef. But it's interesting, actually, because the perception, if people realise that there isn't beef on the menu, is that they're not being, you know, for those who aren't in the know, that they're not being looked after because there's no beef on the menu. It's such an interesting behaviour, and I see it, you know, frequently, or that it's a cost-cutting exercise.
And just to underscore the power of this, on a production that we did a little bit of work with Charlotte on, the lead actor said, can I have an EV? It enabled the production to then invest in charging points so that all the ground transport was electrified, right? Like the knock-on effect is so powerful. I'm probably talking too much. I saw a question over here.
Oh, hello. Is this a microphone? This is a tiny microphone. I have a tiny microphone. Firstly, thank you all very much for what you've said tonight. I found it very inspiring. I asked this question to someone entirely outside your industry. In an industry where so many, probably 99% of the people who are working in it are so defined or feel like they are defined by the last piece of work that they did or the next piece of work that they're about to do, and that their position is so precarious, how do you address the anxiety that what you are asking people to do, and you've got to believe that people want to do the right thing, but the underlying anxiety that it will affect end product, that ultimately taking the train rather than a car will make them get up earlier, which gives them a little bag under their eye, which the camera will pick up, all of those little nagging anxieties, or a DP who doesn't get the bulb that they want to give them their perfect shot, or the costume designer who needs these, all of these underlying anxieties that really come from a place of people wanting to do the best work for themselves and also for their output. How do you address that in people?
Status is fluid, community is forever. Whether I'm number 1 today and number 4 tomorrow, the people that I work with are still my friends. The conversation is ongoing, isn't it? The culture change is something that is dynamic. So getting caught up in the, the anxiety and all that is perfectly understandable, but, when I'm standing outside Tesco's with my sweats because I forgot to get the milk, no one gives a flying fandango that, oh, isn't that the guy from Gangs of London? It doesn't matter. I'm just a guy who forgot to get milk at Tesco's. But I'm still me, and my friends, my community, are still my friends and my community. So let us get rid of the status anxiety and focus on the continuity that is us and the conversation that is us, I would say.
But then how do we, because something we really want to talk, and you say this a lot, Fainty, is how do we make it ethical, like rooted in climate and nature, but excellent at the same time?
I think I'd say that you don't take a risk. So to your point about inviting people in and experimenting, I think if you haven't done it before, test it. Don't try it out live. You trial something, know that it works. You don't want to be experimenting on, when you're in production. So I think that's what you do. You don't never put people at risk of failure or looking stupid or like not looking their best. Like, never do that. Yeah.
All right.
It's worth just adding that those are the type of things that we think about. One of the things that we're trying to do is get the Green Ride in the collective agreement with... yes, you'll hear, oh God. But one of the things we were talking about, so something like taking a train over a plane, in that conversation for a train over a plane is the recovery time from taking the train. So that's factored into how do we make this so this person can take the most environmentally friendly option and be ready to do their job. So that's all equated in making that decision, is one thing I'll say. And another thing is I think one of the things that would be really good to take away from this whole thing, especially is working actors, people on the grind, people making their way through, is that there are so many more people than you think wanting to support the decisions that you're making. And I think that has become really clear, is that when you go to ask for something, what you can get is a no, and then that's fine. Or you can get a yes and completely change how that production works. And I think, especially when we feel like there is a lot of precarity in our jobs, the fear of the thing is more than the thing itself. And actually sometimes asking for it isn't going to destroy your career or who you are. It is worth reminding.
Yep, I think we have time.
I was never going to not speak. But just to sort of say, like, collaboration as well, like, we're all in a collaborative media, so anything that enables communication and collaboration at a deeper level should make more excellent work, because we, like, the biggest stump, as someone in from the development scripting process, any form of, like, people not listening or, like, not kind of on the same page, literally, then that's when you get the, like, you don't get excellence, because you're basically not communicating, either not listening to what's being communicated to you, or you're not clearly communicating what you need to do. So the more community you have, the better something should be. And so if you're spending time in cars together and dinners, like, you should be able to create better work as well. So anyway, that's it.
I think I'm going to have to start wrapping up. Is that right? Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
And just a reminder to continue the conversation up in our Ubuntu lounge. Do you have a question? No. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do it from the back here.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for the conversation today. It's been really inspiring and joyful. On the conversation joy, I wanted to know what conversations you'd had potentially with children or young cast members, comparing the kind of current education on climate and the environment. It seems like kids have a lot more education on topics beyond recycling. I think I was just like a recycling lady that came to my school when I was in primary school. So when you explain about sustainability on set or green stories, what's the feedback either from the children in your lives or younger cast members?
I haven't had that experience of.
No, I
talking
have to
kids
be
about-
honest, I haven't either, and it's very rare to actually get to speak.
I don't like other people's children. I don't care what they say. But actually, speaking of that, there is a generation who are much more have much more confidence, much more, and sitting in on some of the chats that they have is quite eye-opening. It is quite eye-opening, and I think there is always, I think, letting the younger voice in the right way it can only benefit, because they're going to be here after the rest of us are gone.
I just like, from what I've heard, is that there's like so much climate anxiety among younger people that like part of what we're trying to like do is not try and find a future that we can be hopeful for, rather than like people who feeling like there isn't a future that they can get excited about at the moment. And I think there was like some tutor in America like set an essay about the Matrix, and everyone said the guy was a terrorist because he was making them wake up from the happy unreality into this dark and horrible reality. And I think like, I guess what I'm saying is like, you don't want to feed the climate anxiety in young people. You want to kind of like try and like, so I feel like it's not young people's, it's our kids. It's not kids' responsibilities, it's our responsibility to do something because we're the grown-ups.
I just wanted to, on a practical level as well, we've had some really interesting feedback through the campaign about meeting younger artists. So obviously we tend to, if a huge star comes to us and says, I want to do this, it's really exciting and it means a lot can change. But that also, we need to be investing some of our energy into like the filmmakers of tomorrow. And I think when we one day have capacity, and if there's anyone really rich in this room who wants to fund us, when we have that capacity, that is some work that we do want to look at, is like actually meeting. And that's slightly twisting your question because you're talking about younger artists as in children, but I think also meeting newer artists and the people who will be making those stories in the years to come, also targeting them and talking to them about how they can make a difference in the work they make.
We're going to have to start wrapping up just because of time, but if you haven't used your drinks token, come up to the third floor and your drinks are on us, so we can keep the conversation going. What I just really, really want everyone in this room to walk away with is a sense of what you can, to your point, Lucian, what can we do? What can we do right now? If you're an actor, I'm going to do my spiel, and then if you guys can jump in with anything that you want people to take away with, that'd be awesome. But what we really want, if you're an actor, go to our website. There's a thing called the Green Rider Handshake Agreement that we've talked about. Have a chat with your agent about it. If you're an agent, have a chat with your actors about it. The power that it has, that we've experienced on shows like The Capture and others that we haven't had time to get into tonight, is that just sending it to the actor or from the actor to the production company has so much ripple effect. If you are, and I totally understand this, and this was such a good point earlier, if you are someone who is not sitting pretty and kind of going, I've got all the power and money in the world, but is living, as most of us are, in a precarious way and worried about your next job, whether you're going to be a pain in the ass, we totally get it. So what we really want to stress about the handshake is it is amendable to your circumstances. Don't feel like you have to come in and go, why is this all wrong? And I want to do this, this, and that. Take it slow, meet people where they are. Just the act of communicating and collaborating has so many ripple effects that you probably won't see, but that we hear about, which is awesome.
Can I just add to that as well? That there's so many ways of activism as well. So we work, as Climate Spring, work in partnership with Green Rider. So if you are feeling tentative about signing on, agreeing to the handshake, there are other ways that you can connect. So perhaps it's a story that we're talking about and we can attach you to somehow, or connect you with the indie that are also wanting to attach an actor to it that is interested in a climate story. So yeah, there's other ways of activism, I guess.
And so if there are people here who are directors, writers, go check out Climate Spring.
And have a look, and maybe you want to submit or talk to us, and yeah, we can always connect you with indies or other talent as well that may want to.
And a little inspiring sprinkle of anecdote on that is that something that I've learned is that you know the concept of a designated driver in the States. They had such a bad drink driving problem in the States, and campaigners were working on it for years. But it was when shows like Cheers, the sitcom, put designated driver into their scripts that it became this household standard that like everyone knew what designated driver was. Same is true of like gay rights, racial equality, like there's so many ripple effects. Adolescence is a great example. It has ignited a worldwide discussion about masculinity. So if you feel like the Green Rider handshake isn't for you, there are so many other avenues to affect culture. The last thing I want to say, and then I want to hear if you guys have final takeaways, is find your networks. Who else can you bring into this? There's so much safety and numbers, and so to reinforce everything that we're doing, the more that you can kind of talk about this on set, talk to colleagues, the more it grows. Is there anything you guys want people to walk away with? Are there things for producers, for writers, for actors?
I would say none of this is going to be perfect. And I think that sort of also answers your question about the anxiety. You know, what if I'm not doing enough? And it's about starting somewhere. And it is about showing an interest. But at the same time, it's about productions also meeting the actors where they are as well. So when things aren't perfect and we can't achieve everything, it's about what can we do and allowing time to try things. And not also, you know, putting people in a position where they are at risk. I think that's just so important. But I think it's about learning, and I think that handshake document is just a perfect way to help people who've not been engaged in this stuff before to learn what the things are that they could consider, but also then to talk. It's a negotiation tool. It's like, if I do this, you know, what else can you do to meet me?
I think that curiosity as well stems into the story, the character, every part of the process. So just bringing that openness to your role as well, and asking those questions with the director, the team, and if there's ways of aligning that integrity, if that is your value system as well, you want to advocate for that. Is there ways that your character can kind of bring that stuff through? But yeah,
and normalising it.
Yeah.
Normalising. I mean, sorry, go off tangents, but it is something that we've been able to do on the capture as well, which is to make sure that anything on screen is also not promoting non-sustainable behaviours. So that's
unnecessarily,
unnecessary. So, you know, it has to, of course, be in line with the narrative, but each department, you know, that is putting things on screen are completely aware that everything that we show and the way in which we do, we're actually making the show on screen is as sustainable as it can be. And actor awareness of that is part of it as well.
No, brilliant. Before we wrap up, we're going to make everyone sit here for 90 seconds, and please scan the QR code behind me. It's going to take you to a super short form. If you can just put in right here, right now, your name, who you are, etc., it will help us maintain this energy and keep the good work going forwards. In order to let you do that, can we have a massive round of applause for our panelists?